let's rewind the clock. We are leaving the suffocating, fluorescent-lit offices of the 21st century and heading back to a foggy morning in 1848. The news that James W. Marshall has found glistening pieces of metal at Sutter's mill, right by the American River, begins to spread like a match thrown into dry grass. Boom! Everything explodes. Imagine you are a carpenter in New York, a tenant farmer in the Midwest, or a sailor on a merchant ship that just docked in San Francisco Bay. Everywhere you go, people are whispering into your ear about a land where gold is just sitting on the surface, a paradise where you only need to bend over and pick it up to change your family's destiny forever. In that feverish frenzy, you look at your factory boss, throw your ragged uniform on the ground, and walk out. Tens of thousands of factory workers, specialists, teachers, and blacksmiths do exactly the same thing. Hundreds of massive ships are left to rot right there in San Francisco Bay because entire crews desert in the middle of the night to run to the mountains. You have officially abandoned the wage slave life. You have nothing in your hands but worn-out clothes, a panning dish, and your most important asset, a single shovel. A romantic vision fills your mind during the grueling, months-long journey. You imagine absolute freedom. No exploitative factory bosses, no micromanaged hours, no complex class systems. Out here in the wild territory of California, Mother Nature is the only one signing your paychecks, and your salary depends entirely on the strength of your own two hands. With every shovel of dirt and gravel you scoop by the stream, you believe you are inching closer to financial liberation. You're getting paid in hard cash, literally gold dust at the end of the day. No taxes, no platform risks, no middlemen taking a cut. You think that, armed with a shovel, you have bypassed the capitalist system to become an independent entrepreneur, a lone wolf in the Wild West. But, welcome to the brutal reality of wildcat economics. By grabbing a shovel and chasing the gold rush, you didn't escape the laws of the free market. On the contrary, you just threw yourself into one of the harshest, most unforgiving, and bloodiest laboratories of supply and demand in human history. The shocking truth that nobody tells you when you quit your job is this: in a massive asset boom, holding a shovel and digging for gold does not make you the boss. When we look at this through the lens of unit economics, you have just turned yourself into a biological depreciation unit, taking on extreme geological risk. You are taking your most vulnerable assets, your health, your spine, and your finite time, and placing them on a casino table where the odds of winning drop by the hour. Furthermore, the seemingly simple act of scooping dirt to find gold is about to drag you into a hyperinflationary trap that can wipe out your entire profit margin in the very first week. So, let's push aside that romantic vision of finding gold nuggets the size of eggs. Today, we are going to use a modern financial lens to dissect the real numbers buried under the mud of 1849. When people talk about the California Gold Rush, popular history books and Western movies usually lump all the prospectors into one single category: wanderers holding shovels and pans by the river. From a business perspective, that is an incredibly short-sighted view. In reality, the entire ecosystem of the gold rush was divided into several entirely different business models, each with its own barriers to entry, risk profiles, and profit-generating mechanisms. Not knowing which tier of this ecosystem you are playing in is exactly why you can dig until you collapse and still end up with empty pockets. The first model, and the easiest, cheapest one to enter, is solo placer mining. You use your shovel to scoop the topsoil and gravel by the stream, toss it into a pan, and use the water's current to sift out the gold dust. The core economic problem here is that the barrier to entry is virtually zero. Anyone with functioning limbs and a shovel can do it. And according to the inevitable laws of free markets, when there are no barriers, the market saturates instantly. In the early months of 1848, the early birds could literally pick up gold off the ground. But when the army of prospectors known as the 49ers, tens of thousands of them, flooded in, the supply of surface placer gold depleted at an unimaginable speed. The marginal return of every single shovel scoop plummeted. You are playing a game where the customer acquisition cost. In this case, the cost of finding a new vein of gold is skyrocketing, while your conversion rate, Actually, finding real gold is in a free fall. Once the surface gold is gone, the market fractures, and we enter the second model: syndicates and capital expenditure. The gold is now buried deep inside solid rock or at the bottom of raging rivers. Your lonely little shovel is now utterly useless. This is when the market shifts to an industrial scale. Groups of people start pooling their money to buy heavier equipment: massive wooden sluice boxes, water pumps, and eventually hydraulic mining tech that uses water cannons to blast apart entire mountains. This model requires massive capex, or capital expenditure. And what happens to the guys who only have a shovel? They run out of capital. Their entrepreneurial dreams are crushed, and they are forced to sell their labor, going back to being wage workers for these massive mining syndicates for a fixed daily rate. Ironically, the capitalist loop resets itself right in the middle of the wilderness. They quit their jobs on the East Coast looking for freedom, only to become day laborers on the West Coast. But the truly brilliant business minds aren't standing in the freezing rivers. They operate in the third model: spatial arbitrage and infrastructure. They look at the tens of thousands of people rushing to dig up the dirt, and they recognize one undeniable truth. Finding gold relies on pure luck, but the fact that these human beings need to eat, need tools, and need a place to sleep is an absolute certainty. Merchants buy shovels, pickaxes, flour, and salted meat from the East Coast or South America at dirt cheap prices, ship them to California, and sell them at exorbitant markups. They apply a geographic arbitrage strategy, exploiting the price difference between a market swimming in goods and a market starved of goods but overflowing with purchasing power. And finally, we have the derivative services model. Your shovel doesn't have to be used to dig for gold. It can be used to dig foundations to build houses for the merchants, dig water wells, or clear roads. The smart players realize that instead of digging for gold and taking on geological risk, they can provide services to the people digging for gold. They open a gold weighing station, a saloon, or a laundry service. They absorb the gold that the miners dig up by providing pure utility, creating a robust economic ecosystem. The most tragic failure of the tens of thousands of workers who quit their jobs in 1849 was assuming that digging for gold with a shovel was the only path. They brought a primitive production mindset and crashed headfirst into a highly complex economic ecosystem. The biggest reason the illusion of getting rich with a shovel gets shattered is because people make the fatal mistake of confusing nominal revenue with real purchasing power. Imagine, after a week of baking in the sun, you dig up an amount of gold equal to a whole month's salary back in New York. Your brain is flooded with dopamine. You think you are getting rich fast. But in reality, you are standing in the middle of one of the most extreme macroeconomic environments possible: a localized hyperinflationary economy. The biggest hidden iceberg is the cost of living trap. Why was everything in California so ridiculously expensive back then? Macroeconomically speaking, the money supply, meaning unrefined gold, suddenly exploded into the hands of tens of thousands of people. But the supply of physical goods like food, medicine, and clothes was severely bottlenecked because California was geographically isolated. There was no transcontinental railroad yet, insane demand, an overflowing money supply, and a trickling supply of goods. The inevitable result is prices shooting to the moon. History records that the price of a single chicken egg in the mining camps could fluctuate at absurd levels, equivalent to tens of modern dollars. A loaf of bread, a bottle of whiskey, or a new set of clothes could eat up days of your hard-earned gold dust. You are making more money than you ever have in your life, but your operating expenses, your OPEX, are at record highs. Failing to account for local inflation turned prospectors who looked rich on paper into starving debtors. Next is the biological depreciation that we almost always ignore. When you are using a shovel to dig through rocks in a freezing river for 12 hours a day, the actual machine doing the work is your body. You are burning thousands of calories. The fuel cost to maintain this biological machine is massive, and as we just established, food is insanely expensive. Worse, there is the medical risk. Living in damp camps, eating food with zero vitamin C, and drinking water near waste runoff leads to rampant disease. Your body is a rapidly depreciating asset. If you get sick, not only do you lose income due to the opportunity cost of not being able to work the stream, but you also have to pay extortionate medical fees to whatever makeshift doctor is in town. Your net profit quickly flips into the negative. At the same time, you face tool inflation. Your iron shovel won't last forever. Constantly smashing it against river rocks causes it to chip, snap its handle, or rust out. You have to constantly replace your tools. That shovel you bought back home for a few dozen cents? Now, at a shop in San Francisco, you have to buy it at a markup inflated by hundreds of times. Your cash flow is constantly being gutted just to reinvest in basic tools to maintain your ability to work. Finally, there is the cost of property protection. In 1849, the law in the goldfields was practically non-existent. When you find a spot with gold, you claim it. But how do you keep it? You have to stand there physically with a loaded gun or pay a percentage of your gold to local gangs for protection. This security cost is a massive hidden tax. The time you spend guarding your claim from claim jumpers is time you cannot spend scooping more dirt. Your labor productivity is capped by the fact that you have to personally enforce the law to protect your own assets. By now, you might be asking yourself, if grabbing a shovel and digging for gold carries such massive risks and gets eaten alive by inflation, where did all the massive wealth of the gold rush actually go? The answer lies in a counterintuitive paradox that has become a classic principle in modern finance. A truth forged by the blood, sweat, and tears of tens of thousands of miners. And it is this: in every single asset boom, the greatest profits are never found under the shovel of the person digging for gold, but in the ledgers of the people, the shovels and the supplies. The people carrying shovels to dig for gold are participating in extreme risk speculation. They absorb 100% of the geological risk, the weather risk, and the biological risk, while their success rate relies on pure luck. Conversely, the merchants selling the tools intimately understand customer lifetime value. A miner might only strike gold once and then go bankrupt, but that miner has to eat every single day. He has to buy a new shovel every time one breaks. He has to wear clothes constantly. The merchant doesn't care which stream has the gold. They only care about creating a choke point where any gold that is dug up must flow through their cash register in exchange for basic survival. True profit is generated by serving those who are blindly chasing the boom. To visualize the brutal economic divergence of this era, let's look at two highly realistic scenarios of what happens when you bring a shovel to California. In the first scenario, the downward spiral traps you. You arrive in California when the easiest surface gold has already been scraped clean. You stubbornly dive into taking your shovel to the river. Because you lack an understanding of unit economics, you don't calculate your return on investment. You spend a week breaking your back and dig up a decent chunk of gold. But in that very same week, you have to pay more than half of it for rancid flour, pay another huge chunk to buy a new shovel because your old one snapped, and pay the rest to a local gang just to be left alone. Your net profit is practically zero. The next month, the freezing water and lack of vegetables make you sick. You can't work, but your living costs still have to be paid. 6 months later, completely penniless and physically exhausted, you are forced to sell that very same shovel for pennies just to afford a steerage ticket on a boat back home. You absorbed all the economic risk, but your profits were drained entirely by massive operating costs. In a different scenario, you demonstrate strategic adaptation. In your first month, you dig in the dirt and quickly realize the profit equation is not on your side. Instead of being stubborn, you execute an immediate pivot. You notice that the mining camps are drowning in mud and waste, while wealthy merchants desperately need to build solid stores but can't find anyone willing to dig foundations because everyone is too busy looking for gold. You put your panning dish away and you only keep the shovel. You walk up to the store owners and contract yourself out to dig foundations and drainage trenches, charging them in gold dust with a clear contract. You abandon risk speculation and shift into B2B infrastructure services. Even if you never find a nugget of gold the size of your fist, your cash flow is always stable. You are digging dirt in a place where you are guaranteed to get paid. A year later, when tens of thousands of miners go home empty-handed, you use the gold dust you accumulated from digging foundations to buy a plot of real estate in the center of the city. You transformed from a blindly hoping laborer into an infrastructure investor, using the exact same shovel to build a foundation of true wealth. Quitting a dull job to seek financial freedom is a justified human desire across all eras. The people who brought their shovels to California in 1849 deserve their place in history. Through sheer, terrifying physical labor, they accidentally created the macroeconomic momentum that built the foundation of the entire American West Coast economy. Honest physical labor, whether it's shoveling dirt or panning sand, is never something to be ashamed of. However, the economic lessons from the gold rush remain entirely relevant today. Now keep in mind, this is a historical perspective, not modern financial advice, and you should always consult contemporary experts before making your own business moves. But the core truth remains. A physical tool, whether it's a 19th century steel shovel or a modern computer system, never generates sustainable wealth on its own. It is your analytical market mindset, your ability to calculate hidden costs, dodge inflation traps, and position yourself correctly in the supply chain that decides whether you will rise to the top or become a victim of your own expectations. The shovel in your hand is just a tool to physically impact the environment, but your sharp mind is the true leverage that pries open the door to real profit.